If you owned all the money in the world, going bankrupt would be mathematically impossible, right? Wrong. Dead wrong. And Spain proved it in the most spectacular way possible. 16th century. Spain controls the greatest treasure in human history. The silver mines of Potosí in Bolivia, the plunder of the Americas. Galleons arriving monthly loaded with tons of precious metal, more wealth than any empire had ever possessed. The Spanish real becomes the global reserve currency. King Charles V rules an empire where the sun never sets. Literal control of half the world's landmass and most of its wealth. Within 40 years, Spain declares bankruptcy 4 times. 1557, 1560, 1575, 1596, 4 sovereign defaults in 4 decades. The richest empire in history couldn't pay its debts. How? Because infinite money isn't infinite wealth. Because silver isn't prosperity. Because Spain made a fatal mistake that every debt-fueled, non-producing economy eventually makes. They stopped making things. And when you stop producing, all the money in the world can't save you. This is Dark Money Historian. And this is the autopsy of how infinite silver killed an empire. And why modern economies printing infinite paper are walking the exact same path to the exact same cliff. Potosí, a mountain in Bolivia so rich in silver that Spanish conquistadors called it a gift from God. And for Spain, it seemed exactly that. A license to print money. Literally, hundreds of tons of silver extracted annually, shipped across the Atlantic on treasure fleets, flowing into Spanish coffers in quantities that dwarfed every other nation's wealth combined. King Charles V looked at this silver and saw unlimited power, unlimited military capacity, the ability to wage war everywhere simultaneously, against France, against the Ottoman Empire, against Protestant rebels in the Netherlands, against anyone who challenged Spanish supremacy. But warfare is expensive. Even with mountains of silver, armies cost money. Navies cost money. Maintaining a global empire costs staggering amounts of money. And Charles needed more than silver could immediately provide. He needed credit. He needed to spend tomorrow's silver today. He needed bankers. Enter the Fuggers, a German banking family, and the Genoese, Italian financiers. They looked at Spain's silver production and saw something beautiful. Collateral. Guaranteed future cash flows. The ability to lend massive sums with absolute certainty of repayment, because the silver was coming. It was in the ground. It was being mined. It was just a matter of time before it arrived in Spain, so they lent enormous sums against the promise of future silver shipments. Charles could wage war today by borrowing against silver that wouldn't be mined for years. The bankers charged interest, high interest, and they required something crucial. First claim on the silver? Before the Spanish crown got any, before the Spanish economy got any, the bankers got paid first. This created a debt trap. The more Spain borrowed, the more of its future silver was already pledged to bankers, which meant less silver available for actual use, which meant needing to borrow more to fund current operations, which meant pledging even more future silver, a debt spiral that accelerated with every military campaign. The Spanish kings were warriors. They thought in terms of conquest and glory. The bankers were accountants. They thought in terms of cash flows and collateral. And the accountants won, because you can't fight bankers with swords. You can only fight them with better accounting. And Spain never learned that lesson. The bankers owned Spain's future. But that's only half the story. The other half is what happened to Spain's present, to its productive capacity, to its ability to create actual wealth rather than just possess money. Spain had silver, more silver than anyone. So much silver that Spanish nobility stopped working. Why farm when you can buy food? Why manufacture when you can import? Why build ships when you can purchase them? Why develop industry when you have infinite purchasing power? Spanish culture began valorizing idleness. Work became something for lower classes, for foreigners, not for proper Spaniards, certainly not for nobility. They had silver. They were rich. Rich people don't work. They consume. So Spain stopped producing. Agriculture declined. Manufacturing never developed. Shipbuilding atrophied. Every industry that required actual labor, actual skill, actual production withered. Because why produce when you can buy? Why build when you can import? This is called Dutch disease. When a nation gets massive resource wealth and stops producing everything else. Modern examples include oil-rich nations that import all their food, all their technology, all their infrastructure. Resource curse, blessing that becomes poison. For Spain, the result was simple. Silver arrived on galleons from America. Spanish merchants used it to buy French wine. English wool, Dutch ships, Italian manufactured goods. The silver flowed through Spain without stopping, entered Spanish ports, left Spanish ports, went to the nations that actually produced things Spain wanted to consume. Spain became a pipe. Money flowed through it. But none of the productive capacity that creates real wealth existed. Spain wasn't rich. Spain was a conduit for silver to flow from American mines to European producers. The Spanish got to touch it briefly, got to spend it on consumption, but they never built wealth with it, because wealth comes from production, not possession. And here's where it gets worse. The silver didn't just bypass productive investment. It actively destroyed what little productivity remained, because silver did something insidious. It created inflation, massive economy-destroying inflation. When silver first arrived, it went to the crown, to the nobility, to connected merchants. They spent it immediately, bought goods while prices were still low, got maximum purchasing power from their silver. But as they spent, money supply increased, prices rose. By the time silver filtered down to farmers, to workers, to common people, prices had quadrupled. Their wages hadn't. Their purchasing power collapsed. This is the Cantillon effect. Money doesn't enter an economy evenly. It enters at specific points. Whoever gets it first benefits. They buy before prices adjust. Everyone else gets destroyed by inflation. The Spanish elite got richer. The Spanish people got poorer. Silver created inequality, not prosperity. Farmers couldn't afford tools. Workers couldn't afford food. Small businesses couldn't compete with imported goods. The productive base of the economy evaporated, and the silver that should have built industries instead bought foreign luxuries while Spanish citizens starved. 1556. Philip II becomes king, inherits an empire, inherits the debt, inherits the obligation to continue his father's wars, inherits an economy that's fundamentally broken. He reviews the finances, discovers that 70% of government revenue goes to interest payments, 70% before funding the military, E for running the government before anything, 70% just to service debt to Fugger and Genoese bankers. This is unsustainable. Everyone knows it. Philip knows it. The bankers know it. But nobody wants to admit it because admitting it triggers collapse. So they pretend, keep lending, keep borrowing, keep hoping silver production increases enough to cover the gap. It doesn't. 1 year later, 1557, Spain defaults, cannot pay its debts, declares bankruptcy, suspends payments to creditors, first major sovereign default in modern history. The richest empire on earth admits it's broke. The bankers are furious, demand concessions, renegotiate terms, get even more favorable loan conditions. Spain agrees, because they still need money, still have wars to fight, still need credit. The debt gets restructured. Not forgiven, restructured with worse terms. 1560? 3 years later, default again, can't meet the restructured obligations, second bankruptcy, more negotiations, more concessions, more debt with worse terms. The spiral tightens. 1561, default again, third bankruptcy in 20 years. Spain has more silver than ever. Potosí is producing record quantities, but all of it is already pledged. All of it goes to bankers. None remains for Spain. 1562, default again, fourth bankruptcy. The pattern is clear. Spain cannot sustain its spending, cannot fund its wars, cannot pay its debts. No amount of silver solves the fundamental problem. They consume more than they produce, borrow more than they earn, spend more than they have. In desperation, Philip tries something. If we don't have enough silver, make the silver we have worth more. How? Debasement. Mix cheap copper into silver coins. Keep the face value the same, but reduce the actual silver content. Create more coins from the same amount of metal. This works temporarily, more currency, same nominal value. But people aren't stupid. They test the coins, realize they're diluted, lose confidence. Inflation accelerates. The diluted silver is worth less, so you need more coins for the same purchase, which means you need more copper, which means more debasement, another spiral. This one destroying the currency itself. Spain's collapse took decades, but the pattern was set early, when they chose consumption over production, when they chose borrowing over building, when they assumed money was wealth, when they forgot that real prosperity comes from making things, not having things. The silver ran out eventually, the mines depleted. The American colonies gained independence. The flow of treasure ended, and Spain was left with nothing. No productive capacity, no manufacturing base, no agricultural infrastructure, no wealth-generating industries, just debt, and memories of when they owned the world's silver. Now look at today. Look at modern economies. Nations running massive trade deficits, importing everything, producing little, funding consumption through debt, printing money when tax revenue isn't enough, assuming that currency creation equals wealth creation. America imports manufactured goods, exports dollars, runs trillion-dollar annual deficits, borrows from China, Japan, Europe to fund consumption. Sound familiar? That's Spain's model. Different currency, same structure. Debt to GDP ratios exploding globally. Not just government debt, private debt, corporate debt, student debt, mortgage debt. All growing faster than productive capacity, faster than actual economic output. Everyone borrowing against the future, assuming tomorrow's production will be enough to cover today's consumption. Central banks printing endlessly. Quantitative easing. Modern monetary theory. Different names for the same thing Spain tried. Create more currency, hope it generates wealth. It doesn't. Never has, never will. Because money isn't wealth. Production is wealth. And printing money doesn't create production. It just dilutes value. The end game is the same. When you spend more than you produce, eventually the borrowing stops working. Eventually the debt becomes unsustainable. Eventually the currency collapses. Eventually you default. Spain took 40 years. Modern economies? The clock is running. Spain had every advantage. The silver, the empire, the resources, the military power. And they squandered it through debt, through consumption, through the fundamental error of confusing money with wealth, of assuming that possessing currency meant possessing prosperity. They stopped producing, let their productive capacity decay, borrowed against future silver, spent on consumption, not investment, imported everything, exported silver. And when the silver stopped coming, they had nothing left. No industries, no capability, no resilience, just debt and poverty. The lesson is brutal. You cannot borrow your way to prosperity, cannot print your way to wealth, cannot consume more than you produce indefinitely. Reality eventually forces accounting, and when it does, those who produce survive. Those who only consume collapse. This is Dark Money Historian. We follow the money to show you that the richest empires fall not from poverty, but from the illusion that money is wealth. Spain trusted silver, stopped producing, and collapsed. Do you think modern economies printing infinite digital currency while running trade deficits will end differently? Which country today is walking Spain's path? Let's discuss in the comments.